welcome everyone to our part 3 of our September Caring for Melanie. And everyone that I can see so far has been with us on at least one of the other 2 sessions. So thank you so much for joining. We want to thank our sponsors for helping us provide this information to you. And our corporate sponsors are ESI, Aware Senior Care, and Kent Thompson with Capital Financial Solutions. And I see Kent is there. So hi, Kent. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for your support. We appreciate that. And we probably will have...
This is twice, Melanie. This is twice this week I've seen Kent, because he was at the walk on Sunday as well. So
that was really great event. I was very, very impressed with how everything came together.
Lots of support there.
It was so nice to see people in person for a change. So nice. So thank you all for coming back and joining us today. And again, we have our presenter is Melanie Bunn, who is an RN dementia trainer extraordinaire. She is our go-to for our office whenever we have questions about dementia. Whenever you call us and we're not sure, we call Melanie. So we want to thank her for being with us again today. We're talking about the later stages of dementia or severe dementia. And just want to remind everyone that after this session, we will send you a link to a recording of the session so you can watch it again, and also a survey so you can tell us both how we did this time and what topics you'd like to see us present in the future. We do have a dementia Q&A coming up the end of October on incontinence, which kind of goes along with this stage of dementia, so it's timely. That'll be October 27th. So we hope that you can join us for that as well. And we will send out the registration link to you. So Melanie, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. And thank you all for joining us today.
So I'm making sure I've got the 27th on my calendar from 9 to 10 about incontinence. So I do. So that's a big relief for everybody. So I was kind of scanning through, and it looks like, a lot of people may not be in this right now, but have been with this in the past and are maybe thinking about, how do I plan and prepare for this? And maybe some people are maybe sort of approaching this or anticipating this. So that's really helpful to know where you are. So thank you for being willing to kind of share that with me. So when we talked last time, and I think we mentioned a little bit about kind of that change from simple to complicated as we're learning things as kids, and then the change from complicated to simple as we have dementia. Did we talk about that last month or last week? Does that sound familiar? We talked specifically about eating. Yeah. And that similar pattern kind of goes on with a lot of other kinds of brain functions. So what I'm talking about when I'm talking about people kind of in this later kind of thing is, I'm thinking about people who have changed from being able to really intentionally get their body to do things to people who really have to have a good bit of support to get their bodies to do things. So that's what I'm kind of talking about, is people who aren't where they can do things by themselves, but they really need a lot more than just verbal cueing, a lot more than just visual cueing. They really need somebody to help them do some things. So if you think about that from a planning perspective, there are a lot of kinds of things that are really important that we know about people, and we know about how things happen. So how many of you have a routine in the morning? Does anybody have a routine in the morning? Okay. So I'm wondering, Holly was nodding, and Holly couldn't talk to us last week. So I'm wondering, Holly, can you talk to us? Didn't you have trouble talking to us last week?
Yeah, we had trouble.
Yeah. So Holly, what is, and don't tell me things that are none of my business. but kind of give me the G version of the clean version of what is your morning routine?
Obviously wake up, get coffee, watch the news.
Okay, so she said, obviously wake up, get coffee, watch the news. So how many of y'all obviously wake up, get coffee, and I know you meant to start after wake up, but how many of y'all wake up, get coffee, and watch the news, and that is your routine? So that's also true for Linda. Is it exactly that routine, or is it something slightly different, Linda? Susan, in capital letters, yes. Susan is in online words is screaming yes at us right now. It's that important. So Holly, what would happen? So Linda, what did you say? Is it exactly that same, or is it slightly different?
Well, I'm not living with the person who, is my care receiver. So my mornings
Oh,
typically are dictated of whether I have a Zoom call or not. And there's several groups that are still meeting by Zoom in the mornings for me.
Okay. So for Linda, it depends on what's going on that day, if that's exactly how her day goes. Because some days she might not get to watch the news because she might have a Zoom call or something like that. So Holly, if for some reason there is a disruption in that process, how does that make your day go?
That can really kind of set the tone for the day.
So tell me more about what that does to your day.
It's just kind of like a discombobulation feeling. Trying to kind of get back on track.
Okay, so your whole day then feels a little bit all on you because you've got, put your hand right here, everybody. Holly's got a prefrontal cortex. She can figure out how to reorganize her day and how to kind of keep moving through her day. But the whole day for Holly is going to feel a little kind of, she said discombobulated. So a little off, a little disjointed. So Holly, if you're having one of those days where you're feeling a little off, things aren't quite lining up right, it's discombobulated, what do you do to kind of help yourself get back into that routine? Or how do you kind of, I was going to say prepare, but if coffee is involved, maybe the appropriate word might be warn the people in your life that you're feeling a bit discombobulated.
Normally you just kind of have to take a step back and take a break and just kind of reset. Sometimes that doesn't work and you just kind of have to me, it's just taking time. Other people, it might be different, but I just need a break for a moment.
Okay, so Holly's saying she just needs to pause everything. She needs to pause it and say, whoa, I need to back up. I need to figure it out. And so you might tell the people in your lives, I just need just a minute. Can you give me, this is really important. I want to help you, but can you give me just a minute and I've got to do something. And what you've got to do is pull back and reset and chug an espresso, and then you can be back in your day.
Yes, start over.
So the parts of Holly's brain that she used to be able to do that, put your hand right here, she used this prefrontal cortex to be able to do that pullback. She uses prefrontal cortex to think about what's going on, how do I come up with an alternative. She uses prefrontal cortex to kind of resequence things. So she used this a lot. Put your hands right here. And she used these temporal lobes to be able to communicate to other people. I need just a minute. I've got something I've got to take care of, and I'll be right back and I'll be all yours. So what would be different if Holly was towards the endish of dementia? What do you think is going to be different about Holly's prefrontal cortex, Holly's temporal lobes, if she's kind of in that stage where her language is something like hep, 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 woo, woo, ba, 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 ba. What is going to be different about Holly's ability to manage her day? So Holly's taking a nose dive. I see several people shaking their heads. One of the people I saw shaking their head was Natalie. So Natalie, can you unmute just a minute and tell me what would happen if Holly had dementia? Oops. So there's a so I can't hear yet. There's a taskbar at the bottom and it's got like a microphone. And if you push it, we'll be able to hear you. Yeah.
Did it come? Okay.
Nice.
Oh, I'd be angry.
Okay, so you would be really angry. And so what's the relationship? Do this with me. What's the relationship?
Do up and down.
Going, okay, I've got hands, they go up and down. So there is a relationship between how angry you get and how able you are to process. So how angry or sad or frustrated or lonely, there's a relationship. The more emotional you get, the less logical you get. And coming back to that midline is when things can really connect and work at their very best. When you're so far down emotionally that you really can't, that doesn't help your thinking either. But we want them right here where they line up. So Natalie was saying, you know, I'm not going to be able to think things through. I'm going to be really angry. I'm going to be really frustrated. I'm not going to be able to communicate. So, and that's absolutely true. Your language is even the language that you've got, you're not going to be able to use. What do you think? So emotional kind of lability is part of it. You don't have the language to express. What about this part right here? How do you think people living with dementia towards the end of dementia do with kind of organizing and forming logical, reasonable approaches to complex situations? Do you think that's a real strength thing or not?
I can't.
Yeah. What do you think, Jody? Do you think that's their strength or do you think not so much?
Zip, no way.
Yeah, not working really well. So if we start to think about us as people who are in relationship with people living with dementia, because if Holly gets dementia, is it still going, is that pattern likely to still have importance and meaning to her? Is there going to come a time in your life when you have so much dementia that coffee doesn't mean anything to you? Can you imagine that, Holly? No. So what can we then, yeah, go ahead and sit down, Lisa. What can we then do as people who are anticipating at some point we're going to be supporting people who don't have the language skills, don't have the prefrontal cortex, don't have the amygdala control to be able to explain to us what their routines are? What do you think we might be able to do now to kind of prepare for that? And Jody, you're already unmuted. Do you have some thoughts?
Well, we can begin to understand what the pattern is. Make note of that and observe. And also, you know, if the person doesn't have severe dementia at this point, it might vary. But if we have a basic understanding, then when things begin to progress, we can go into that pattern to provide some structure and foundation and stability. So we don't have to deal with the other stuff.
So we want to start by noticing what is it now. We want to start by noticing what is that person's routine now. So we want to look at morning routines. Is there another time of the day when a routine might be particularly important?
Bedtime.
Bedtime is another really important, because as soon as I take my contact, I've worn contacts since I was in high school. As soon as I take my contacts, what happens to my brain function? I'm gone. I'm done with the day. No more from Melanie. I take my contacts out, I'm done. So knowing those routines at nighttime, getting those pieces in place. I had a lady who would be really distressed and she'd be walking around, knocking on doors, banging on doors. And she didn't have the language to tell us, but what we finally found out she needed to do was go check on the children. the last thing she did every night for decades of her life was to go check on the children, make sure the children were in bed and the children were okay. Because she had 8 children and they spread out over, 30 years. And so, checking on the children was something she had to do. So that's something we can do now to kind of plan and anticipate what are we going to need to be able to provide that structure. A friend of mine talks about scaffolding. Of the scaffolding isn't the doing, but it's the holding up the doing. So thinking about knowing, so Holly's routine now is get up, coffee, news. Holly, when you were in high school, was there a different routine?
Yeah, there was.
So what was the routine in high school? And again, G-rated version.
It was pretty much to get ready for the day and just go on about my business.
So
But as
just
I've gotten older, it's just you got to have a little bit more routine.
so I didn't have as much routine because there weren't as many responsibilities. There weren't as many things that you had in control of. You had as much to do with. Yeah. So these routines, do you think these routines are really important throughout the day? Yeah. And so we think about current routines, and then we start to think about routines from the past when the person was maybe a young adult or when the person was maybe a child. Those routines might have been different. I was working, and I actually told this story recently. I was working with a lady who wouldn't leave the house. She just wouldn't, no. And finally what the family started doing was they brought in a lipstick and a mirror. And she'd look in the mirror and she'd put on a lipstick and then she'd be ready to go. Because for her entire adult life, the last thing she did before she left her house, it was a big mirror in the hallway. The last thing she did before she left the house was what? Add her lipstick in, put on her lipstick, and then she was ready to go. So that was how they would start to kind of trigger that. So that idea of one of the things we can do to plan and prepare is to really notice how do people do things now, and then to explore how did things used to be. So I might ask Beth. Beth, can you unmute for a minute?
Hi.
Thanks, Beth. So Beth, I am curious. When I was a little girl, we took a bath every night. There were 3 of us, and every single one of us took a bath every single night. When you were a little girl, was that what you did, or did you do something different?
I don't know if I took a bath every night, but I remember reading every night.
Oh, so every night before you went to bed, you had some time that you did some reading.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So now I know that that's really important for Beth. Thinking back to when she was a little girl. So I start gathering that information and holding on to it, because I may not know what's really important to somebody later on. So one thing, here's a question for everybody. Do you brush your teeth before you eat breakfast or after you eat breakfast? And you can just drop it into the chat. Do you brush your teeth before you eat breakfast or after you eat breakfast? So Holly brushes her teeth after. Beth is both. And an after, and an after. Ooh, lots of after kind of people. Before, there's a before, but a couple of befores and a lot of afters. So if you, let's say I am a person who always brushes my teeth after breakfast. So now Lisa is my care partner. Lisa's here with me, and Lisa is my care partner. And I'm at the point where I'm needing some help with brushing teeth. And Lisa's a very skilled care partner. So Lisa knows she's going to help me this way. She's going to put her hand in my hand, and then she's going to put the tool in her fingers. She's going to put that other hand under my arm. And now Lisa is going to help me brush my teeth. And she's very skillfully, so I'm doing some of the fine, she's doing all of the fine motor. She's moving her fingers with the tool. She's brushing my teeth. I can kind of tell her which part I want to brush next and how I want to brush and how long it goes. So she can do some of that. But when she finishes and my mouth is now nice and clean, what am I not going to be interested in doing if it's time for me to do it? What am I not going to be interested in doing? And Holly's got it right, eating, because in my mind, what has already happened?
Right.
If I've brushed my teeth, it means I'm what? I've already eaten. So if Lisa wants me to eat well, she's going to have to make sure she does what? She assists me with eating before she assists me with brushing my teeth. Now I'm going to ask you to do this. Are we in speaker view?
No.
I'm going to ask you to, I don't like this, so we don't ever do this because I like to see everybody. I think y'all like to see each other. I'm going to ask you to, at the screen, at the top of your screen, there's something that says view. And if you go there, you can either do speaker view or gallery view. So if you do speaker view, what you'll see is you'll actually see me and Lisa taking up, I would say probably 90% of the screen. Did you find that? So now Lisa and I are taking up the whole screen because I want you to take a moment and watch what she is doing with me. So Lisa, choose a tool. And Lisa's going to choose a spoon. And so I already kind of told you, Lisa's doing the, do this with me. Lisa's going to do the fine motor, because what I, as a person living with dementia, who's in kind of this late stage, severe state, do you think I have a lot of skill, a lot of fine motor? Mm-mm. So skill and fine motor is really not my gift and my gift and my go-to. What do I have a lot of then? I've got a lot of strength. So I don't have a lot of skill, but I've got a lot of strength. And I've also got something else. The other thing I've got is kind of automatic movement. So when what Lisa does is she shakes hands with me. So Lisa's going to shake hands with me. And then she's going to rotate her hand into a butterfly. And then we fold over. So now we're in an arm wrestling handshake, or we're in, the handshake where you do the rest of it. We're not going to do the rest of that stuff. Good. So we're in this handshake. Now, Lisa, wiggle your skill fingers, keep your strength fingers. So her strength fingers are going to give me the support I need. Her skill fingers are now going to manage the tool. So Lisa's going to put the tool in her hand. And if you take my hand away, how do you usually hold a spoon, Lisa? Like that. So if you take my hand,
Actually, I usually hold it left-handed.
oh, you're
So
left-handed.
It's a really
weird.
good thing to talk about, that you want to be on the dominant side of your person, which may not be your dominant side. Melanie's right-handed. So for this, I need to be right-handed too. So normally I would hold a spoon like this. And this is the same way that I would hold it for Melanie.
And Lisa actually has an advantage. And she doesn't know she's got an advantage, but she's got an advantage because left-handed people tend to be much better at doing right-handed things than right-handed people are at doing left-handed things. Why do you think that might be?
Because it's a right-handed world.
It is a right-handed world. And so Lisa doesn't always have I was doing this and I said, I was talking to a guy and I said, so Chris doesn't always have left-handed scissors. And Chris says, Chris has never had left-handed scissors. And you could see there was a little bit of lingering resentment there. So Lisa's actually going to adapt much better to doing this than I would. So Lisa's got the tool in her skill fingers. She's using her strength fingers to give me support. That and that other hand is under the elbow. That gives me the ability to use my strength, because the strength is bringing it up to my mouth. And then the motor, automatic motor, is once she brings this into my mouth, my automatic reflexes is what? What does somebody think my mouth is automatically going to start doing? Beth, can you unmute and tell us, what do you think my mouth is automatically going to do when I bring my hand up to my face with something that I can smell? What is my mouth automatically going to do?
It's going to open.
My mouth is automatically going to open. And then what's going to happen next?
You'll chew,
I'm going to chew and I'm going to
swallow.
swallow. So it kind of starts that muscle pump. It starts that muscle memory process. So Lisa brings it up to my mouth. I open, I chew, and I swallow. It kind of gets that in place. So it works really well for me with brushing my teeth, with eating. It might work really well with, we're going to pretend this is a bath cloth, with washing my face, because it lets me do what? And I'm gonna ask Jody to unmute and answer real quick. What does this let me do?
That lets you be as active and involved as possible and continuing the motor memories of your functioning.
So it lets me be active. It lets me keep my motor functioning going. It brings back my old reflexes. It helps me have opinions, because I might actually, if Lisa's helping me eat, she might go for the asparagus, and I don't really care for asparagus, especially not when it's ground. And so I'm going to move her over towards the green beans, because I do like green beans, even when they're ground.
Or I might be going too fast for you, and you can push my hand down to tell me to slow down.
Yeah, so I can communicate with Lisa. I can say more of this, less of that. Slow down. I'm hungry. Let's go a little faster. I need something to drink. So the same kind of thing works with a cup. So she's using her skill fingers, her strength fingers, and my strength fingers to do that. Now you'll notice, to do this, how far away is Lisa from me? And I'm actually going to have you turn your chair to face this way a little bit more. And I'm actually going to have you straddle your legs. So now Lisa's in a really, oops, come in a little bit. Lisa's in a really nice, stable position for herself. And I am as well. So Lisa being left-handed, if I'm working with her, she's going to face y'all. I'm going to face like this. I do the same kind of thing. I put the tool in my non-dominant hand. I'm going to make sure I'm coming right up to the midline. So I might actually do this in front of Zoom to make sure I'm coming right into the midline. Just do this with me. Turn your head. Now swallow. And what happened when you tried to turn your head and swallow? Did it work well or not so well? Holly, how did that go for you? Holly is giving me thumbs down. Jody's putting more difficult. Yes, it's harder, because we are wired to swallow straight on. It's the best way to close our trachea, so we don't, our larynx, so we don't get food down into the lungs. So that's just how it works best. It just works best when we do it that way. So that coming into the midline is also really important. So take a minute And you've seen us do it. I'm actually going to ask you, most of you will probably have a pen or something in your space. So find that pen and put it in your dominant hand. Lisa gets to actually use her dominant hand, because when you're learning something, she's quite skilled at this. When you're learning something, you want to learn it with your dominant hand. So put a finger thing in your dominant hand. And now think about, do this with me. Put, we'll see if this works. So y'all can see if you're not. Put your dominant hand and face it towards your face. So my dominant hand, put your non-dominant hand and face it away from you. Because the way this works is all right or all left. So because I'm right-handed, I have a right hand and a left hand. And even if you're left-handed, you have the left and right hand. But I need to make myself another right hand. So I'm gonna make myself another right hand by making my pinky into a thumb. So now when I hook my pinky and my thumb together, and I go into a butterfly and I fold over. So now I'm in that hand under hand. Now I pick up my tool in my skill fingers, and this is how it kind of feels to help that person using hand under hand. Now I will have in the PowerPoint, I will throw in some slides with some hands that you can look at with a spoon in it, and some other kinds of instructions about that, the all right or the all left. So I'll give you some of those tools so you can practice, but also if you need to, can they practice with somebody else, do you think?
Mhm.
So you can practice with somebody else if you need.
And you can practice with your loved one who you're caring for too. You can say, I just learned this, will you help me? And you can practice with them.
But before you try something complicated, do you want to practice it with somebody and get kind of good at it before you practice with somebody who's struggling? Yeah, probably so. So let's talk about that hand under hand. What do you think about that? Do you see some places where you could use that, some places where that would work? I'm gonna ask Bridget. I know she's got a lot of experience. Bridget, would you stay? What? Do you want me to stay here? Maybe. Okay. Because somebody might have a question. So what do you think? How do you think that might work, or how do you think you might use that with your person? Hi, Bridget. Can you unmute? Yay! It's so good to see you.
Too. So using it at meal times or bath time, shower time, just different times like that when they still want to be as independent as possible.
Yeah. So using it shower times, and we actually work with it some when we do the Q&A on incontinence. We might work with it a little bit there as well. So yeah, so good examples. So does it kind of make sense? Have you kind of got it? I'll send you some resources, but if it doesn't make sense, you can reach out and let us know. Any questions? Anything you want to see Lisa show you again or show you differently, or are you kind of good? You can do thumbs up if you're feeling pretty good, or if you're confused, or I have no clue what's going on. So I'm seeing some thumbs up, so you're feeling pretty good. Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate it.
And I will say that the more often you do it, definitely the easier it gets.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, yeah. Because it's a motor skill, right?
Mhm.
And so how long, and it's almost harder because you know one way to do it. So if you've been used to doing it for yourself or used to doing it one way, kind of doing it a different way, it's almost harder to unlearn and relearn something than it is to just do it. And thanks, Susan, for being brave enough to put in so in there. So give it some practice, and then let us know how it goes or what you need some more work on. We could actually, if you want to put it in the thing, we could actually do a whole session and have everybody bring, a glove and tools and a person, and we could actually do some real practice with it. Cool. So any questions about hand under hand and that way of helping? but there are a lot of other things that we can talk about. So we've talked about the idea of kind of preparing by thinking through what can the person do now and how do they do it now? How did they do it back a while ago? We've talked about that. We've done that, a way of helping kind of re-triggering some of those muscle memories and kind of re-engaging some of those connections and giving people a way to have opinions. The last thing we're going to talk about is something else that changes in the brain that we don't always think about. And one of the things that when babies are born, how are they shaped? So kind of show me how babies are shaped. You know, babies are kind of shaped like this. They're kind of all pulled in and everything is really tight. And is that good? Yeah, that's good. Because we want babies to grow as big as they can in a, well, not as big as they can. We do not want them as big as they can be, especially when they've got to come out. We don't want them as big as they can be, but we want them to get a reasonable size in a space that's only going to get so big. So they can get bigger if they're like this. We want them to come out in a certain kind of safe way. So this helps with that. And also once they're born, we want them to be able to kind of maintain their temperature, and temperature regulation is a real issue for newborns. And so if you stay huddled up like this, you conserve heat, you get better. So what then happens a few months in is these reflexes that are pulling us in like this, these reflexes start to let go because another part of our brain, our sensory motor strip, starts to get more sophisticated. And so some of those reflexes that keep us like this get overridden. And so by the time kids are getting ready to walk, how are they shaped? You know, they're shaped open and they're shaped, legs are still pretty far apart because, you know, there's that balance thing, but they're shaped in a way that they can start to walk and start to move unless there's something else going on with them neurologically. They're shaped like that so they can effectively move and walk and do the things, the next kinds of things they need to be doing in their lives. So that's wonderful. That's fantastic. So there are a couple of those things. And one of those things is this pulling in. Another reflex that babies have is if anything touches a baby's hand, what does the baby do? The baby grabs onto it. So if that's your hand, the baby grabs onto it. If that's a spoon, the baby can't use it, but can grab onto it. And then they realize they can control the world. So that's another, that grasp reflex is another reflex that newborns are born with, that eventually they have to learn to what? To let go, because it's just as important for function to be able to what? Let go as it is to be able to hold on. So that reflex we override and we are able to kind of control it. Another one, a third one that happens with newborns, if there's anything touches a newborn's mouth, what does the baby do? Is that good? Yeah, that's really good. That newborn needs to, because that's how the newborn gets the nutrition. That's how the newborn interacts. So that's really important. Lots of nerve endings there for that reason. Eventually, if you have a spoon and it touches your lips, is it functional to go? It's not. What's functional in that situation is to do what? To open your mouth. And so that is the next level up. Other kinds of things that happen with newborns, if you touch, and y'all may not have had experience with this, if you touch a newborn space, the newborn turns its head that way and roots and tries to find something to eat. Another one is if you stretch a newborn's arm out, what does the baby automatically do? Pulls it back tight. So you stretch a newborn and they pull it back tight. That's that kind of that automatic reflex. So a lot of these automatic reflex, all of these automatic reflexes, as our brains mature, as the brains of newborns mature, they develop it like an on and off. I can either do this or I can turn it off. I can turn it on, I can turn it off. I can hold on, I can let go. So that's what happens in the brain of people as they become more neurologically developed. So when we start thinking about that, moving this way, what do you think might start to happen to people getting towards the end of their lives with those kinds of reflexes? What do you think might start to happen? And I see Linda turned her camera back on. So Linda, if you can unmute, what do you think might happen to people getting towards the end of dementia? If babies have this option, what might happen? I would love to hear what you're saying. If you can unmute. I do it all day, every day. So it's that on the taskbar, it's the microphone looking thing. It's got a red line through it. Can you click it to make it unmute? It's still got a red line through it. I'm sorry. It's the one, the taskbar for Zoom. Yeah, you know where it is. It's just not working. I'm sorry. Okay, well, drop it in the chat then what you think. Add it to the chat because I see some things. So they become more into themselves. So those reflexes start to kind of come back. So have any of you seen somebody living with dementia who's moving towards the end of the disease? Grab a hold of somebody's arm with their strength. What can they do? They grab a hold of somebody's arm with their strength. And what then happens? They're strong and they can't let go. So Lisa, would you come back in here for a minute? I said, you asked me if it was okay and I told you it was okay. And now I've changed my mind. We'll bring Lisa back in. She's just down the hall. She doesn't have to drive to my house anymore. Hi, thank you, Lisa. So what happens is I grab Lisa's arm, and now what is Lisa's reflex? To pull away, which makes me do what? And so now we've got two reflexes because the reflex I get here, the reflex to grab and hold on. And I don't have like it's not like I've got the variations because I can, if I'm doing this, I can do various kinds of touch with Lisa. I can do open-handed massage for Lisa. I can support her like this. I can do something with both hands. For people living with dementia, they've either it's on or it's off. All or nothing. It's all or nothing is a great way to put it. So if it's all, I've got a hold of her hand. Now, when I hold her hand, Lisa's going to do what? She's going to kind of want to pull away, which extends me, which means now I get this flexion response. And now Lisa's going to start calling me names. Not Lisa, because she knows what we're talking about. But what kinds of labels might we give this kind of action? Yeah, you would say, Melanie is being combative or agitated is what Holly put in. Either any other kinds of things. And it looks like I'm doing it, I'm difficult, aggressive. It looks like I'm trying to hurt her or like I'm being aggressive when truthfully what just happened was a reflex.
You're not doing it on purpose.
I'm not doing it on purpose, it's a reflex. So if Lisa wants to get loose, what has she got to do?
Not this. Right?
Not that. We know that doesn't work because that's just going to bring in another level of reflex. So give Lisa something to try. What could she try? She could pry my fingers off, but that's also going to trigger what? That might hurt me. It might hurt my arthritic fingers. It might, it's going to hurt to bend my fingers back. So what do you want Lisa to try to kind of see if she can? So Jody said with a song or a joke. So see, Jody sings. So Jody, sing something and see if Lisa can start some movement and see if she can get out of this.
You're so kind to say I sing. I'm a joke in my family. So please let go of me. Won't you let go? Oh, please let go.
It worked, yay. So, and that kind of is a combination thing, is bringing something else in. So when we talk about preserved skills and lost skills, one preserved thing is what? That rhythm and music. And so giving that rhythm and that movement kind of got me into clapping, doing something different. So that was a good one. And Beth said to give, or Bridget said, give something else to grab. So it might be if I've got this and Lisa puts up something that's much more interesting.
Melanie, hey.
Yeah, that's the you know, so maybe something that's a brighter color or something that is a different texture or it makes noise. That might be something to try. So that's another good one. Beth said to get the other hand. So maybe get into the other hand like this, give me some pressure here, and then maybe transfer me to this one. I can squeeze as hard as I want to in this hand under hand and not really hurt. And someone else said, if you kind of stroke that other hand, you know, that might encourage the letting go, bringing this hand closer to me, might
Maybe
kind of
slide
get
it a little bit.
yeah, because that's giving me another way of kind of interacting and engaging. I think I really am done. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, welcome back.
Okay. So that's kind of how to use some of those to start thinking about it, that when you put the spoon up to my mouth and I go, it's not that I'm refusing to eat, it's that I'm having a return of that reflex. Healthcare people, when they go to pull my arm out to take a blood pressure cuff and I yank it back, does that mean that I'm resisting care or something else? It might hurt, or it might just trigger that. If I have shoulder problems, it might just trigger that reflex of you stretch my arm out and I pull it back. So those are some great thoughts and some great ideas to start thinking about with some of those return of some of those overlearned reflexive kind of movement things. So the last thing we're going to talk about for today, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end if you've got some questions or something. The last thing we're going to talk about is the idea of thinking about the things that happen from a healthcare perspective, not as being automatic, but as being choices. So what I mean by that is, as my brain is changing and all the parts of my brain are changing, things are changing that control life-sustaining functions. So things like my ability to respond to infections is changing. And that's why people living with dementia are at very high risk for urinary tract infections, for pneumonia, for all kinds of infections. So that's not working as well. These reflexes that aren't working actually get to the point where they're starting to impact things like that automatic swallow. So people living with dementia are losing the ability to chew and to swallow, and then their bodies are actually losing the ability to absorb nutrients from whatever it is that they chew and swallow. So if we start to have conversations early on about what is really important to you, you know, what, and we can have these conversations for ourselves. We can have these conversations with the person living with dementia early on. We can have these conversations among ourselves as a family and talk about not what do we want, but what would this person want? So for example, I know, I knew a lady whose feet, I knew her for about 50 years. and her feet were always cold. And so it would be July in North Carolina, and she would have on flip-flops and toe socks, which was not a good look. You know, flip-flops and toe socks, not a good look, but she didn't care. And why was she willing to look kind of odd from my perspective? Why was that really important to her? Because her feet were always cold, were always cold. And so it was a comfort thing for her. Thanks, Jody. It was a comfort thing for her. So for her, part of her, at the end of her dementia, part of our plan for her was that we were never going to let her feet get cold. And so for the rest of her life, we kept, we washed her feet. It wasn't that we never took her socks off. We did take her socks off. We did change her socks. We kept her socks clean. We kept her feet clean. But we always made sure her feet were warm. So when we start to think about end of life conversations, one of the challenges is, just like we think with people living with dementia, not just talking about what's lost, but talking about what's preserved, not just talking about what we don't want, but talking about what we do want. So we can have conversations about things like CPR, if the person would want CPR or not want CPR, if the person would want feeding tubes or not want feeding tubes, if the person would want antibiotics or not want antibiotics, if the person would want to go to the hospital or not to go to the hospital. We can have those conversations. But we should have as many conversations about what do you want, not just what don't you want. So we can have conversations about, I've always hated pain. I don't like being in pain. I've always been tender-headed. I'd rather you cut my tangles out than try to sit there and get those mats out. I've always been tender-headed. Don't mess with them that way. So kind of have those conversations. What would this person want, as well as what would this person not want, if they were able to speak out and choose for them at this time of their life. So we've got about 3 minutes left. I'm going to ask you, Linda got unmuted. Hey, Linda.
Hi, how are you?
Did you want to add something?
No, I decided if I was going to go all the way out and come back in and see if that worked, and it did.
And it did. So I'm glad you're unmuted. So thank you for sharing that with us. I'm glad you came back. I was afraid you weren't. I'm glad you came back. So when you think about what we've talked about, we've talked a little bit about those return reflex. We've talked a little bit about thinking about how people do things now. We've talked a little bit about the idea of using hand under hand. And we've talked a little bit about having conversations about what do people want, as well as what would they not choose at this point in their life. Are there any other questions or things you would like to add in the next 2 minutes? Any questions or things you would want to add?
Melanie, I have a quick question. So you said that at the end of life, we're losing our ability to swallow and our body is not processing nutrients as much. So does that mean that we're feeling hunger, do you think?
Yeah, that's a
We're
great
not.
question, Lisa. And so hospice did some research and they measured some of those stress hormones. And what they found is people at the end of dementia who weren't eating weren't releasing any of those stress hormones, which indicates that they're not feeling hunger. They're not feeling, and we actually know that from people who don't have dementia, who are dying from other challenges, who do have their language, who can express things. And they've been able to say, hunger is something that when you're dying, hunger becomes less and less of you don't feel hunger. You may still like the taste of a peach milkshake or like the taste of chocolate pudding, but you don't crave food. You don't feel physically hungry. So it looks like Pamela put New Living Will documents that address the eating reflex. I know there are living will documents out there that address what you would want to do if you couldn't swallow, anything like that. I don't know of things that I've seen that are specifically and closely related to these change in reflexes. Lisa, have you seen or heard of anything?
No, I don't believe I have. You
So
can always write things in though.
you can always add things in that when I get to the point that I can't chew, make a bolus and swallow, I just want recreational eating, which is just sensory eating, which is I want the taste of things. I want my mouth to be kept moist. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I want my mouth to be clean. I want my lips to be moist. If I'm breathing through my mouth, I want my mucous membranes to be moist. But I want to taste things, but I don't necessarily want a feeding tube or to think about nutrition because it's not being absorbed. It really isn't working. Anyway, it is 1 o'clock. That means it's time to turn it back over to Lisa. So thank you, Lisa, and Holly put in the 5 wishes. Thanks, Lisa, for hosting us and for inviting me to be part of this. And I will send Lisa the PowerPoint today or tomorrow, and she will send it out to you because I didn't know what we're going to wind up. I mean, I know things to talk about, but I didn't know which direction we might wind up going. So I will look forward to seeing some of you later on.
Thank you so much, Melanie. And I really appreciate you taking the time to go through these things that people sometimes have questions about, but don't know how to ask. So if you all have any more questions that you think of on later stages of dementia or early or middle stages of dementia, please feel free to email us. And I will send those questions to Melanie and we'll get that answered for you. Again, we want to thank our sponsors, Eastside Aware Senior Care and Kent Thompson. Thanks, Kent, so much with Capital Financial Solutions. We appreciate you all joining us for this series. Please do let us know in the survey that we send you how else we can help you meet your educational needs. We wish you all well. Hope you have a wonderful day and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks so much.